Hello everyone and welcome back. Now in this video we are going to be answering the FizzBuzz question. It's a very popular coding interview question that most people usually struggle with. So we're going to take a look at that question in this video and we are going to be answering that with Python. So as you can see, we are asked to write a function that takes an input and performs some actions. Now these actions, there are actual rules here. Now we are going to take the input, and if the input is divisible by 3, we'll return a string fizz. If the input is divisible by 5, we'll return buzz. Now if the input is divisible by both 3 and 5, then our program will return FizzBuzz. Else, if the above conditions are not met, we'll just print out what the user has entered. Okay, so I already created a Python file here, fizzbuzz.py. So yeah, let's jump in and get started. Okay, so we all know the syntax of creating a function. We do def, then we write our function name, maybe FizzBuzz, then we'll bring out a parenthesis. We are going to take an input actually, so it's going to be an integer, so we'll say number. Sorry. Okay, so now we are going to do some comparison here. Now if the input is divisible by 3, we are going to return fizz, and if the input is divisible by 5, we are going to return buzz. So this is how I'm going to answer the question. Okay, it's very simple. So if our number mod 5 equals to 0, that means that if the number is actually divisible by 5, that is if the number is divided by 5 and the remainder is 0, okay, we are going to come under here and then execute the block of code that is under this if statement. Alright, so inside this if block, I'm going to define another if statement. That is if the number mod 3 is also equals to 0, which means that we are going to return FizzBuzz. Okay, now what this means is that it will take the number and compare to see if it is divisible by 5. Okay, after it is this line has been executed, it will also try to compare it with this line again to see if the number is actually divisible by 3. Now, which means that if it is divisible by 5 and it's also divisible by 3, we are going to return FizzBuzz. And if it is just divisible by only 5, which means that we are going to go out of this if block and then we are going to return buzz. According to the question here, if it is divisible by just 5, we are going to return buzz. Okay, so we are going to return buzz. Alright, so here else that means that we have actually tackled two things. You see, we've checked to see if it is divisible by 5, which means that if it is just divisible by only 5, we'll return buzz here. And if it is divisible by both 3 and 5, we'll return FizzBuzz. So let's check our little program rules here. So which means that the first rule, I think we have tackled it. We've also tackled the second one very well. So out of this, we're not going to say else. That is else if the number is actually divisible by just 3. That means that we're going to return the string fizz. Now what this code does is that after it has checked to see if the user input is divisible by 5, it will check to see if it is also divisible by 3, then it will display FizzBuzz, which means that if it is able to come here, that means that if the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, we are going to return FizzBuzz. But if it is just divisible by only 5, we are going to return buzz. And we'll come down to say else if the above, that means that if this is not executed, we are going to check the next rule here. If it is divisible by just only 3, then we'll return fizz. Okay, all right. So that means that we have checked for the FizzBuzz. We've checked to see if it is divisible by only 5, and we've checked to see if it is divisible by just 3 only. Okay, so we have our last rule here. Okay, if the above conditions are not met, just print out the input. So we are just going to check if all these conditions are not met. We'll just print out whatever the user has entered. Okay, so else we'll just return what? Else we'll just return the number. And actually, I think that's all. Our function is complete. Let's check to see if it works fine. So let's print out FizzBuzz, and we're going to give it an input. So let's give it something like 10. Let's save it, and then let's run our code here, the terminal. Alright, so let's run our code. Python fizz. Let's run the code. So if it's the number 10 is actually divisible by 5, so it will return buzz. Let's check our rules here. Now if the input is divisible by 5, it will return buzz, and if you check here, our program actually returned buzz. Let me enlarge a little bit so you can see that our program returned buzz. That means we have done that correctly. Let's check to see if, let's say 15. So let's run our program again. 15, we've got FizzBuzz, and if you check, 15 is divisible by both 5 and 3. Okay, and let's say that was rule number 3. If it is divisible by both 3 and 5, we are going to return FizzBuzz, and we just did. Okay, so what if I enter something like maybe 7, which we both know is not divisible by any of them? We are going to return just that number, and we actually did that. You see, it's very simple. Okay, it's very simple to actually implement this with Python. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the code one more time. Okay, we define our function, and you know the syntax to define a function. You use def, your function name, and then if it takes an input, you just put it there. Okay, if it takes any parameter, just put it there. Now we have our conditions there. So we defined our function as FizzBuzz, which took number as an input. Okay, so we are going to check now if the number is divisible by 5. Now this mod operator here actually checks to like it compares the two values that you've given it, and it will return the remainder. So what we are simply saying is, if the number is divided by 5 and the remainder is 0, okay, we are going to execute the code that is under this if block. And actually inside that if block, we had another if statement which was checking to see if the number was also divisible by 3. So if you look at our rules here, it was telling us that if it is divisible by both 3 and 5, we should return FizzBuzz, and that's just what we implemented with this lines of code here. Okay, so else if it is not divisible by 3 inside this if block, then we'll return buzz, which means it's only divisible by 5. Now we also check to see if it is not divisible by 5 and 3. That means if it's only divisible by only 3 here, then we'll print fizz in the terminal. Or if the above is not actually met, what we are going to do is we'll just return the number. Okay, so else if the number is not divisible by 5, if it's not divisible by both 5 and 3, and if it is not also divisible by just 3 only, we are going to return just the number that the user has entered. Very simple. Okay, so yeah, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know what you think. Okay, and I'll see you in the next video.